Hi there and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about new measures by the PSD government in Portugal to roll back controls on the Alojamento Local short-term rental sector in the country. Now, as viewers may know, I'm not exactly a huge fan of the former government of Portugal, which was the PS or Partido Socialista, led by Antonio Costa. It's been succeeded by the PSD government, led by Luis Montenegro now. But one thing I will say that the PS actually did well is that they got some kind of idea in their heads that Alojamento Local in Portugal, meaning short-term rentals, basically Airbnb, wasn't particularly good. And they did take some action to stop it, and they put into place measures to control the growth of the industry in Portugal. Because understandably, like many Portuguese citizens or other residents of Portugal, and I include myself in that, the former government felt that the sector had really grown too fast, it had come too far, and it had absorbed too much of the housing stock and just was causing problems in terms of rising property prices and a lack of available long-term rentals, which again was having knock-on effects on the price of rentals. And if people want more information on that, they can look at another video I made earlier on the housing crisis in Portugal. The PSD are evidently cut from a different cloth than the former government, however, and for whatever reason they've taken it upon themselves, probably under pressure from the Association of Restaurateurs, Hoteliers and other connected businesses, which is a lobbying group for the industry. They have decided to reverse these previous government policies, and there are going to be several key changes, all of which are going to promote the growth of Alojamento Local in Portugal now and in the future. So just to run through the main changes, first of all, there's going to be an end to restrictions on new registrations. Previously, it was very difficult to register a new Alojamento Local, especially in certain localities in Portugal, and now that's gone. Secondly, they need to go through a mandatory license renewal process and to present all the documents again and such like things has also been removed. The automatic expiry of expired AL licenses has also been nixed, and there has been a removal of the requirement to review all AL licenses in 2030, which the previous socialist government put into place. And fifthly, the regulations have changed so that condos in Portugal no longer have the absolute right to approve or cancel Alojamento Local licenses or applications without justification. And I think when you say without justification, of course everybody can understand that. It doesn't seem fair to cancel or refuse something without justification, but I think you have to closely examine what qualifies as justification now to refuse or to cancel a license. And I think that without a very clear set of criteria, that might be very problematic as an area in the future. In my opinion, if a building has many people who are renting their house out on AL, then definitely it can cause a lot of problems in terms of noise and security for the other residents of the building. And how difficult is it going to be for the condo association to justify that? I really don't know. I just think it's a potential area of problems. Now, industry groups have obviously applauded the changes. They think it's fantastic. They argue that this is going to allow the industry to grow. Do we really want that? I don't think so. But anyway, they're promoting the idea that the increased legal certainty associated with the new regulations is going to be beneficial for the growth of the sector and therefore for the country. Obviously, I'm not in agreement with that, but that's their perspective. Another change, which on the surface sounds good, is the idea that responsibility for policing AL and for granting licenses, etc., basically setting rules, is going to be decentralised to municipalities. It's going to be taken away from the central government, given back to the municipalities. They can make their own decisions. Now that sounds like a good thing, but when you consider that many municipalities aren't exactly fantastically well organised in Portugal, and many municipal assemblies are deeply divided, it's very difficult to achieve decisions and that kind of thing, or make changes. So it might be problematic for these municipalities to come up with their own regulations which actually deal with this industry in an effective manner in a reasonable period of time. And I also think on a local level, where you have a lot of maybe powerful short-term rental companies in the local community, they're maybe more easily able to exert influence over municipal councils and municipal councillors than they would be at a national level. And I think that this plays in the industry's favour. If I have to be honest, that's what I think. I don't think that municipalities are going to clamp down on AL in and around their area as heavily as national regulations would have. I just really don't. So I do see this as a significant win for the AL industry and for people who are connected to it. I mean, who really benefits from the existence of short-term rentals in Portugal or indeed in any country? Well, first of all, the people who are running it, obviously they make profit from it. Tourists, because it's basically cheaper than a hotel would be in most cases. So yes, tourists who are not residents in the country normally and don't vote, etc., and have no interest in the future of the country, basically they benefit. Aside from that, migrants who occupy a significant number of AL spaces, which is something I'm going to touch on in a future video, and maybe other, ancillary industries that are connected to tourism and want more tourists to come into their cities or their areas. I could see how, for example, restaurants or tourist attractions might support these changes. However, for the majority of the population, particularly for people who are struggling to make ends meet and want to rent apartments or buy houses at reasonable prices, this is definitely bad news. If AL is allowed to grow out of control, then over time it will just basically absorb more and more properties, and you'll have more houses and apartments removed from the long-term rental market and from the sales market, more supply being drawn down. And we remember from the housing video that Portugal isn't building a lot of new housing, not at all. So supply basically is being reduced. The population is increasing because you've got so many migrants coming in, and you've also got tourists coming in and properties being taken off the market and transformed into AL. So it's basically a perfect storm of factors which will drive rents up. And I think that that is in the interest of people who own property or people who rent property, but it is very much not in the interest of the ordinary Portuguese person, a family with a child or two who are, not rich by any means and are finding it difficult to meet their rent payments. I think that this is going to be something which causes them significant challenges both now and especially going forward as the industry continues to grow in size and absorb more and more properties. Just to close, thinking about Porto as an example, it already has more than 10,000 Alojamento Local locations, both big and small, around the city. The question arises, how much is enough when it comes to this kind of thing? Tourists traditionally used to stay in hotels. I wonder why they can't. Why is it that in the 21st century tourists can't stay in hotels? They have to stay in basically privately owned accommodation, people's houses which have been converted into places which can be used for tourists and migrants as well, which is a separate category. Why is that? Why can't tourists simply stay in hotels, and why can't we have more hotels constructed? I don't see why that should be a problem. Now, some people are going to make the argument that AL is a kind of personal freedom, basically. If you have your private property, then you have the right to use it however you want, and if you want to rent it out short-term on Airbnb, then that's up to you. However, I think that that kind of philosophy is, first of all, a little bit selfish. But secondly, it falls down when you consider like other things. Like you can't use your car in any way you want. You can't just park it where you want, or if you want to depress your horn constantly, you can't do that. There are lots of things with your private property that you're just not allowed to do. So the idea that you should be able to use your private property in the sense your house or your apartment in any way that you want, I think that that's not really very reasonable. And I think we have to focus on the fact that short-term rentals cause massive problems. Looking beyond pushing up rents, which is definitely the main problem, it just causes problems in terms of the comfort of other residents. Like, why was it that the socialist government passed regulations which allowed condos to cancel AL licenses? Well, I actually don't have a lot of experience of living in a condominium which has AL in Portugal. I don't. I own my own home. But I have seen it firsthand in Thailand. And I've seen circumstances where people have bought condos and they're living there, or they have long-term tenants and the tenants are living there, and then somebody else has converted their apartment into basically Airbnb. And you have people coming in, staying for 2 or 3 nights, staying for a week, staying for a night, staying for 2 weeks, and it's pretty chaotic. People coming in and out. It's very, very noisy and disruptive. They have to move in and out every few days. Some of the tourists don't exactly behave very responsibly. They come home drunk late at night. It also poses security risks because they don't vet their guests. They don't have criminal checks or anything the way that you might if you're actually signing a lease in some countries. No. For Airbnb short-term rental, you just pay the money and you're in the door basically. So it's an enormous security risk for buildings. You're basically letting people into the main area, the public areas of a building, and you don't know who they are. You don't know really where they come from. They could even be using a fake name. I mean, it's just not a good thing. I think it's quite justified. Beyond the fact that it pushes up prices, there are other problems that this causes, social problems in terms of the comfort of residents who have to basically live around this. Now, the landlords themselves, they're away somewhere else, they're not bothered by it, they just get the money. That's great. But the people who are actually living in the building and dealing on a day-to-day basis with, all of these Airbnb tenants coming and going, I think that that's a problem, and it does really deserve some consideration. We can't just selfishly say, this is my property, I do what I want with it, and if you don't like it, move. No, I don't think that's reasonable in modern society. People have, of course, the right to use their property, but they don't have the right to use it in a way which really adversely affects other people. I think that that's a basic social rule. I mean, you have your freedom to do what you want up to the point where it comes into contact with other people's freedom and enjoyment of their life and starts having serious negative consequences. And these are real consequences, not things that people just made up. If you're kept up until like 3 a.m. by some tourist playing loud music or shouting out the window because they've drunk too much, that's a real problem if you have to go to work at 8 o'clock the next morning. I think it's something that we shouldn't just brush off and dismiss as being a minor concern when we're considering the growth of AL and short-term rentals in Portugal. I think it's something that really does deserve consideration and attention from the government, and I think that this policy change has been profoundly regrettable, and it shows things are going in the wrong direction, and government in Portugal probably are listening to the wrong groups. Alright, well that'll do it for this video. I hope people found it interesting and enjoyable, and I'll see you soon in the next one.